My name is Jaden Chong. I'm one of the teachers here at Vincent Music. I teach piano, guitar, and vocals. One of the things that has come up in my students' lesson is sometimes the difference between doing things such as slurs. I'm just going to quickly move the camera. Doing things such as slurs. Something along the lines, just making a very clear melodic line versus something closer to grace notes. Now, some of that is simply due to piano, just sometimes the strength of your hands, because sometimes it'll take a while for you to develop your strength in terms of doing some of the cleaner runs, in terms of doing some of the more legato lines, and that's okay. But I find that for me personally, it's better to get it's one of those things to just get done, or at least kind of sorted as best we sort of can. So, in relation with the student I'm doing this lesson to, there's two pieces I want to go over. One is the one which I actually did cover the last time I did this, which was Bergmüller's Arabesque. I'll just briefly play it. I'm not going to play the whole thing, just for brevity's sake, but there is, with the characteristics of this particular piece, it was just very short. Just a very crisp sort of sound, but we also have that flowing legato line. Just making sure that legato line is very crisp, very clear, as best as we can. I mean, crisp not to the point of pure staccato, because otherwise it'd be and it ruins the point. It has to be clear but smooth. Now, the other piece that I want to present today is a clear contrast to that, and this is the Japanese koto, composed by Christopher Lee Goldston, and this features in the Amy B. Piano for Leisure book. But this is a piece which is similar in its own distinct ways, but also extremely different. And the reason why I say that, we have to focus on the legato, but there is pretty much no staccato. We have to make sure that we are of the utmost clarity as best as we can. Let's give it a play. It was a little bit of a sight read, I would really say, but in reference with this particular piece, one of the things you might have noticed about how this particular piece goes is that we have to really keep an eye on how this line goes. We have the da 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 da. Yes, we do have to keep the damper pedal on throughout, but it does not mean that we can just play the notes without any phrasing. The phrases have a direction. They have a path to keep. We know that this goes up. left hand, we really need to emphasize, even though we have to keep the tempo pedal down throughout, everything has to have its own particular say. The Bergmüller's arabesque is a little bit different, but in a lot of ways has a very similar concept. We have to make sure that the right hand, as best we can, is very clear. And we have to also make sure that with our left hand, again, as I mentioned last time, it's been a while since I've done one of these. You're going to make sure that the left hand is kind of very striking in this particular case, but it has to be heard. And so, that was only just one kind of half of the piece, but case in point, everything needs to be clear, whether it's a little bit of staccato or the Japanese koto, in which there is no staccato at all. Everything needs to be clear as best as we can, and we really need to follow the legato lines kind of going on like da, 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 and now, pardon my little cracking, it's just a little exercise, just a little thing that I do. But in terms of how would we achieve this? One, there is the obvious answer of practice, but how would we get this kind of correct practice to doing so? The thing that I've found over the years, in terms of doing something like this, is just taking it very slowly. Not necessarily always holding it down, but making sure that some of these wrist rotations, just keeping on doing some wrist rotations, just kind of making it sing a little bit. Let's bring the little camera a little bit closer. If I were to do something a little bit similar on the left hand, just a little improvisation here. Just making sure the wrist is doing a lot of the work, not the fingers. The fingers are there, and they obviously need to put a little bit of strength into it. But if we put too much of the fingers, it's just too tense. So we can hear the tone difference if I use the fingers versus. Now that was just a little bit of a random improvising tangent, but we see the point. We need to make sure that our wrists are kind of the things in motion. And the same goes with, left hand was just the example here, but right hand. Something along those lines, right? That was just a little bit of improvisation based on that particular section that I do, but making sure that as best we can, I'll give a bit of a brief demonstration as to how we might rotate our wrists, because imagine that we're just kind of dragging them a little bit right, not with the fingers. If we're dragging with the fingers, if we let our fingers do all the work, then our hands will respond in turn. It's just going to be very tense. So I'm giving this example in the right hand, but this is transferable to the left hand if in the opposite direction, or any direction you'd like. So, with the right hand, just imagine that a little gust of wind is kind of moving it along. Almost as if your hand through the wrist is kind of, and these are random notes that I'm playing, but almost as if your hand through your wrist is making the movement, not through the fingers. If I were to do something a little bit more of a classical figure, I would use the same technique. Or if I wanted to do something like jazz, similar, even though it would be a little bit more percussive. And if we go back to that figure, same technique. Every hand is different, and so sometimes what I've used may not work, and that's okay. But I find that as best as possible with the students that I've taught, just moving the wrist has made it so that it's a little bit more of a relaxing experience, or at the very least, making sure that, pardon me, it makes sure that it's at least a little bit easier on the hands, as well as just making it much more of a smooth experience. So there we have it. So, if a bit of an introduction to these two pieces, that being the Arabesque by Bergmüller, as well as the Japanese Coda by Christopher Lee Goldstein. I hope that this little tutorial has given a little bit of extra insight as to how we might potentially play these pieces, with similarities and differences of the particular pieces, of course, but just to see how that all goes. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely day, and I may speak to you soon.